Hi. Hello, YouTube people. Thank you for subscribing. I just want to put that out there. Thank you for subscribing and sharing. I hope that you and your families, your animals, your plants, the land around you are doing well and you're safe and healthy. So, I feel like I had an epiphany over the weekend, and I'm going to share that with you all. And pretty much from here forward, this is really where I want to stay focused on in these videos that I share. I'm going to start with this. There is a history that has been hidden from us. There was a time we had elongated skulls. There was a time we were giants. There was a time, and there is a time, there still is a time, that we communicated with galactic beings. We see spaceships. People have told stories about seeing aliens. I know since my early 20s, experiencing extraterrestrial events in the sky and around. Uh, there is proof that from the pyramids, from Machu Picchu, from the mesas of Arizona to Stonehenge, that we aligned great um, great buildings and energetic power fields miles apart. There's proof that these celestial alignments are all around the planet. There used to be giant trees. This is not taught to us. We have a higher self. There's chakras, there's meridians in our bodies. There is this information out there that it's out there, and it has to be really researched. It's not always public. It's really interesting because as much as the technological age gives us so much information at our fingertips, some of this information is hidden, or some of this information needs specific wording to find it. I know in my last video I mentioned the movie Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. If you get a chance, watch it, because it really speaks about what we're capable of. And these are truths as to who we are. We've recently learned that the Olmecs and the Toltecs of South America, those giant heads made not from, chiseling things away. Same with the pyramids. We know that they weren't built from how they've told us they were built. So what are we capable of? We're far more capable. Another truth, this is, I know what I'm doing as far as it's going to piss people off. And I have to run that risk because I've felt these things since I was young and have seen things in a different way because of so many reasons. There's proof, or there is a story, that we all came from the same creator or creators, especially within the Sybil Bible. Within the first part of the Bible, it tells us they created us. And that means we are all related. And when we go into the scientifics of each being, light, as we call white people, are actually very, very, very light-skinned black people. People who were once called albinos, that continued to procreate together and created what we now call a white race. when technically we are all related, even though we will separate ourselves, which I think is part of the whole point, to keep us in a low vibration and a low thought process and a low mental slavery type of condition. I've mentioned people like Dane Calloway and Kumaru, who I really need to get his last name to share with you. I think if you put in Truth About the Americas, his name will come up, or The Hidden History of Americas, his name may come up. And I believe he does it with his brother. But his first name is Kumaru, okay? They have educated most of the people who are what are now called African Americans that they are not actually from Africa, they are from this land. And one of the things that came to my mind recently is in the books, I've never seen these books, but in the stories, the story is the first I've read, if you have one drop of indigenous blood or First Peoples blood, now what we call Native Americans, which is not even, anyhow. If you have one drop of indigenous blood, you are indigenous. If you have one drop of black blood, you are black. I find that interesting that those two match up. But the facts of the matter is that there is this information that humans are far older than what they've been told they are. There were giant trees. I mean, giant trees. Giant trees. There were giants. There were creatures who had elongated skulls. We were able to follow the stars and align our houses and certain what they now call like monoliths or sacred sites. How did we do that? How did we do that? We're not talking about that. We're not taught these things in school. We are not taught these things on a regular basis. It's not even in the news. Only in certain places you might catch a glimpse of the news, especially when it comes to aliens or galactic beings. What we see in the news is a constant bombardment of, to put it simply, fuck shit. If we are constantly being bombarded with, okay, wait, before I get there, if you've watched the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, if you've watched The Secret, if you've watched anything about Dr. Emoto and his work with water, we learn that consciousness is extremely powerful. We learn that if you, the saying is, what you think about comes about. And I believe that Mother Teresa once said, don't ask me to march in a fight against war, but I will march for peace. Because the more that we perpetuate a certain mindset, the more that mindset perpetuates. Okay? So if we are fed certain information that is emotionally triggering, because nothing works as good as emotional triggers, and people who have been in rough relationships have experienced what is called racism, have experienced poverty. We know that carries a certain vibration. And we know that it is extremely difficult to go to said people who are projecting that consciousness onto us or onto others, it is very difficult to go to them and say, hey, this is what you're doing. This is what's happening to me internally. And if this could change, then we would be a healthier being. We would be a happier, healthier being. If there is an agenda from one side, they're not going to listen and they're not going to change their mind. So we've learned that only we can change our minds and only we can do certain things. So for example, one of the things that came to my mind over the weekend, oftentimes in the news and in the media, we are told, women are told, people of color are told, they are the minority. This is a constant wording that we hear constantly in the minority. And the consciousness relates that to a small amount of people. And in truth, that is not the case. I had this theory: if every single person of color were to stand next to each other and surround each state by its borders. I mean, in some states, the idea is that there aren't a lot of people of color in those states or in those cities or in this country. Yet that has to be impossible because there's more brown people on the entire planet than so-called pale face or extremely light skinned people, right? And it would be a way of showing ourselves and the world how many of us there actually are. Maybe right now isn't a good time to stand right next to each other. Even if we stood 6 feet apart from each other, we could surround probably each state, the entire country, the entire continent of people of color that are constantly being told they are the minority. And this is a political and class setup. We can go back in time and listen to the stories of the peoples. The stories of the peoples are different from what is taught through school and history. To this day, many of us of my age, between the ages of, say, 30 and 60, learned that the pyramids were tombs. That's what I learned for many years. The pyramids were tombs, and that they had slaves that would carry them up these huge planks, and all these people trying to figure out the levers and all this stuff of how those were built, and that each pharaoh would order a new tomb built. We're now learning and have been learning that's not true. There are some that are tombs, but predominantly the main pyramids are energy fields, and then also certain places are temples, but predominantly those pyramids are energy conductors. Now, we've also learned that places like Machu Picchu are older than the pyramids. Very similar building where the stones are so close together you can't fit a blade of grass or a razor in between them. Some of those structures show repair that in our modern technology are unexplainable. Why aren't we talking about these things? Why aren't these things what we learn about in school? Why don't we learn about our chakras? Why don't we learn about emotional control? Why don't we learn about Reiki? Why don't we learn about meditation? Why don't we learn about things that actually elevate us to be healthier, more aware, and even curious? They don't let us know that there used to be giant trees. I think they do in Sideways, like the movie Avatar, or in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is a movie that came out when we were younger, and they used the Devil's Tower as an example. And that totally looks like a tree stump left behind. We are told through geology that these things are created through odd lava deposits or odd tectonic and plate tectonic shiftings, when really I think there's more to it. I think there's things they just don't want us to know, because if we are constantly being fed fear, rage, and what happens is those energies, so we buy into it, so to speak. So our energy is given in whatever emotions have not actually been healed, perpetuate. So one of the things that I find interesting also is, yes, many of us understand the politics and the issues isn't even the problems that exist in this country, as far as race, economics, and gender. This is constantly. It's been a repetition for so long, for hundreds of years, perpetuating more of that. Remember earlier in the video I mentioned how consciousness affects everything. So if we can, or if those in a certain position can instigate a mindset that is constantly there, constantly being fed to us, that's what we're going to bring about. But if we had media that was reminding us that there were giants, that we follow the stars so closely that we have these monoliths all around the world that are in alignment with stars, if they reminded us that we're actually technically all related, we all came from the same creator, if they reminded us that there were giant trees, if they reminded us that there are Olmec and Toltecs, if they reminded us that Machu Picchu is actually older than the pyramids, they reminded us what all of these beings did, the Atlanteans, the Lemurians, those on Mount Shasta, those on Stonehenge. And even if you look at the dress and the rituals of each of these groups, you can go back to the beginning time when we were of the earth and worshiped the earth always, and lived off of the earth in a very sustainable, natural way. They taught us meditation. They taught us to work with our emotions rather than feed off our emotions, literally buy into these stories. How are we really ever going to improve? I mean, I hate to say this. I have thought about, yes, we write our mayors and we write our politicians and we write those who are in a position of power, and we explain our position, and we tell them that we're going to say either not vote for them, or we're not going to participate in going to these stores or these places anymore, so that we can help shift how certain people are being treated, I hope it works, but I don't think it does. I, I don't think it does. I don't think our voting matters really. And this is terrible to say this. But as long as we have an electoral vote and we have two different parties that are basically the same, how are things really going to change? It has been no secret what's been going on with the indigenous people of Americas, uh, on and the poverty and the displacement. It has been no secret the racism that has existed for people of color, people of dark skin that are called African American. And what better way to keep us separated by continuously telling the entire world that that's the truth? There's no stories from Africa about that. And there's plenty of stories here about people being moved around and being told different things. And we have infinite proof of this. These things are being hidden by, say, the Smithsonian and other groups. I mean, how many of us know about the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks and the medical industry and how they've benefited from that? There's so much that is hidden from us and then proposed to us through media in a completely different way. So the truth is, we had elongated skulls. We were giants. We are capable of aligning with the stars and building according to the stars. We have the capability of communicating with the planet in a way that isn't taught in school. This is or taught in general. And actually, if you bring these things up, what has been taught is for if I'm one of those people coming to somebody and saying, I had a dream last night that this is going to happen. Typically what happens is somebody says, oh, that can't be possible. And then when it does happen, now I'm a witch. Or I'm somebody practicing something that I shouldn't have, because that's been indoctrinated in people. I think that all of this, all of what we've been told, all of the things and we see aliens and we communicate with the aliens. This has also been written, okay, in stories of the peoples around the world as far as the spirituality. If you look at the Bible, it talks about different beings. If you look at the Maharaja, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, that speaks about different beings. Kali Ma is blue. Kali Ma is blue and predicted and depicted as black, yet she's also depicted as being very scary and bloodlusty. Vishnu is blue. And let's see, and I don't know much about Buddhism as far as outer galactic beings. I do believe within Islam, the stone that is in Mecca, that I believe it's in Mecca, but the stone that's inside the cube that is circled around, that stone is supposed to be from outer space and hold healing properties. There is this knowing that there are beings, I'm now under the impression those are our grandparents, that created us. Not even the impression. This is what I believe. And I get that where I'm coming from is way off and could be considered dismissive. Yet I actually think a lot of the storylines that we've been force fed are to keep us totally focused on something other than what we're actually capable of and other than actually who we are. So with that, I'll share a little bit of some of the recent information. Uh we do often and can connect with intergalactic beings or spaceships as they're called. That's a whole nother thing. Like the space war, the space occupation. What's that about? And we all have heard stories, that there's um, a base on the moon, and that there is and have been proof of beings being seen in outer space and here on this planet. How come we aren't taught that? How come that isn't the everyday thing? Um, People who can open portals to whole other dimensions. I mean, that's really what we're capable of. I know it sounds way out there and somewhat crazy, but I've seen it. I've seen it happen. I've seen it with my own eyes in real time, not on TV. And have felt for years. So there's this programming that's been going on, and I noticed it as a kid because I like TV. I like to watch TV. I think it's fun. I think movies are fun. I like the idea of that imagination. But I noticed as a kid that there was always a certain group of people that always seemed to know what they were doing, and a certain group of people that didn't. That through time, as certain groups of people were introduced, I mean, we still don't have a lot of people of color or people with different body types on television. That is something new to our culture, to our media, because people have over time noticed these things. But there's been a certain programming. The Kennedy assassination, we were told a whole story for many, many years, and then so many years ago, the truth comes out about the Kennedy assassination. For 9/11, we were bombarded with certain truths about that, and then years later, more truths comes out about 9/11. How long are we going to do this? Even the Vietnam War. How about the syphilis testing that happened in the 40s to the group of people who were told that they were getting medical injections to help them be healthier? We are aware of what our government is capable of doing. We are aware of what secrets are held, and what truths are given or what we're shown. And it perpetuates this. I mean, to me, it's like, what can we possibly do? How can we possibly shift this? Is this going to be something that actually what's happening right now, as far as an awakening as to what has been happening to people of color in this country? Is it going to last? Because the same thing happened with Rodney King. The same thing happened before that in Watts. I mean, I at the risk of, hurting people's feelings or pissing people off, it's not about that, because I'm not denying that these things have happened and how they affect people. I've seen it in my own family and in my own upbringing, that people of color have to work far harder, have to go through great lengths to prove themselves. A great show that kind of shows how that happens is Shameless, where they end up having a black child in their family, and he no one everyone kind of forgets him. He's not seen, and then he is seen when he's needed. And this is something that has been literally systematically programmed into people. It's been systematically programmed into the mindset of how things are looked at. And so this is not new. And there are tons of groups already and tons of people already who in their own lives, in their everyday waking lives, are standing up against racism, standing up against sexism, standing up against classism, and working towards educating others and themselves as far as the truths and possibilities of what really exists out there. What is often left out is the magical realm of consciousness, meditation, chakra work, energy work, sound work, talking to the galactics, light language, all of those things. Hieroglyphs, petroglyphs. We learned this much about that. This much. And then it's kind of shoved under the rug, so to speak, because is that real even? We have all these myths and stuff, and we're taught that those things aren't real. Yet more and more proof is coming out, and whether it's proof or not, I can look at a tree stump, and then I can go to what is called Table Rock, where I live, and you can blatantly see that those are the bases of a tree. I mean, why aren't we talking about these things? That means that we are far more than what the energies and the media and even the institutions are teaching. And again, the greatest, most heart-wrenching, biggest lie that has been fully accepted by the entire world is that most of us came from Africa when we did not. And I say we as in people of color, African American, who's been called African American. We're not African American. We are American. We're some of the first peoples. And the whole world believes this. The whole world believes this. The whole world has forgotten that we used to be giants. The whole world has forgotten that there are giant trees. The whole world has forgotten that these amazing buildings were built by us, and that these amazing buildings are in perfect alignment with the stars. That's incredible. And I'll mention the Dogons again, who knew about all three of the Siriuses before somebody with a telescope was able to see that. That's what we're capable of. That is what we're capable of. That is who we truly are. We didn't come here for this crap story, instigating dis-ease, really. Because as easily as we can be focused on dis-ease, rage, hatred, separatism, separation, they can teach us the truth about who we are and show us that we're actually more alike than not. Show us that we are actually capable of healing whatever separatist ideas are out there, whether it's in home or out in the world, in the workforce, so to speak. And that's a whole nother thing. Like teaching us that we have to work every day. I mean, It's really about that we're far more. We are more. We're far more than what is continuously shown to us. We're far more capable. And it is absolutely a mindset to keep us in a constant emotional trigger, to become focused on something over here or something out there, rather than understanding that we are more. We're far more. There are giant trees. There were giant trees, and there are giant trees. And there are trees that are thousands of years old. Humans have been here for far longer than what they tell us. That's it. Thanks for watching. May you be favored. May your lands, animals, families, yourself be well and healthy. And see you next time.